And here I am once again in the lovely Champagne Dreams Productions branch office. Let me zoom in a little bit. Hello, Tanya. Hello, Dion. Thank you for popping over after Dion's live. If you have not checked out Dion's channel, make sure that you do. If you like fabulous makeup looks, and if you join her membership, which is only $2.99 a month, you also get to make member requests, so you can determine what kind of content goes up, which is very exciting. I've been a member for a while, and I love it. Hello, hello, how are we doing? Welcome to June. Happy Pride Month. Hello, Mama Champagne, how are you doing? Hello, hello, hello. I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope if you are coming over from Dion's Live, I hope you have a snack, I hope you have a drink. We are two broads who love to talk. So, yes, so we just had a ranking, palette ranking, order words, palette ranking over on Dion's channel, and so now we are over here for the first of the Pride chats. So very exciting. Welcome. Hello, Grace. How are you doing? Nice to see you as well. But yeah, I am very excited. So this is the first one. This is kind of a bonus. I decided to do Pride chats every Friday in June. Every Wednesday. Get your own days right, girl. What are you doing? Every Wednesday in June at 7 p.m. Central, I'm going to be doing Pride chats. And so they are all pre-scheduled. So if you check out the live tab here on my channel, you can see what the topics are. There's a couple that are film related because I'm kind of a film nerd. And then there are a couple that are more like politics, community kind of related. One of them, the one that I think is on the 17th, is going to be a little bit of a hot topic. So definitely want to check out that one. But then I thought, you know what, if other things come up, I want to make sure that we have little impromptu Pride chats. So this is the first, maybe the last, maybe not. We'll see if any other topics come up. But this is the first kind of like impromptu bonus Pride chat. And for this one, we're going to be talking about queer theory. So I am the trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. And I love to geek out about queer theory. And I think that queer theory is something, anything that has the word theory in it, people are like, oh God, it's going to get boring. And I promise you that it is not. I am a nerd. I love theory. I loved theory classes in college, and I love it. I love thinking about all this kind of stuff. Hey, Vampy girl, welcome. Thanks for coming over. I love theory and stuff like that, but I think that theory is important to like think about how people actually live their lives and what they experience in their lives. I think that theories are great, but I had somebody that I worked with when I was in my grad program who, she would always say, anytime we would get too like up in the clouds, too like theoretical, talking about all this stuff, she would say, put it on the ground and make it walk. And so that's the thing, is that like a theory is great, but if your theory doesn't actually explain what happens in people's lives and their experiences and all of that kind of stuff, then what are you doing? What's the point? What are you doing? Oh dear, Logan, we're just gonna get rid of you right away. Usually I talk to people a little bit, but we are not going to be doing that. Goodbye. Hello. Yes, so we are going to, because that's just like objectively wrong. So we're just also going to get rid of that. Yeah, so we are going to be talking about queer theory today. Oh, I forgot to block you. I just removed your comment, Logan. You are trash, so let's get rid of you. Let's get rid of you. It is just like objectively true. There's all kinds of numbers that you can look at. This one, too obvious. Are you saying that it's too obvious that I'm gay? Remember, when you do gay, you have to do the hand gesture. Gay. Absolutely I am. Well, I prefer the term queer, but which we're going to get into. We're going to get into that. And I have my lesbian math teacher hair. Like, we are here. We are ready for Pride. I did buy some hair dye because, oh, look at how, oh, the hairline. Oh, the wind just shows the hairlines of us all. Oh dear, people are switching. This is, just ignore people if they come in and talk trash, but it looks like it's going to be a Thursday. Welcome to Thursday. Of course, the first day of Pride would be a little bit Thursday. There's going to be some lurkers, and so we'll just ignore them. But yeah, so let's talk about it. And I've somehow already lost my notebook. How have I managed? Oh, I set it back here. Okay. I was like, how have I already managed to? So let's talk a little bit about my qualifications, if you will, because this is also important to note, is that this is my, like, this is my understanding. This is what I think of when I think of like a basic kind of intro to queer theory. This is what I'm talking about. Because I did my master's program. I did an MA in English. I graduated in 2008. So it has been almost 20 years since I was in college. And I wouldn't say that I'm like super I haven't really kept up with it. I've kept up a little bit and I'm kind of in the discussions and things like that, but certainly in terms of like academic queer theory, I haven't been in it for almost 20 years, so it's been a little bit a while. Do I need someone to I think we'll be okay. Usually there's like little spurts of Thursday popping in, but hello Locke, hello, welcome. Yeah, so I'll kind of keep an eye on it. If it gets too bad, I know I've got some people that would mod, so I appreciate that. Yeah, so I did my master's in English, and I graduated in December of 2008. My mother was very adamant that I had to attend both of my college graduations, and so I graduated with my undergrad in the summer, and I graduated with my graduate degree in December because I was absolutely not going to go to a May graduation and sit through that. Not a chance. So I made sure that I got to do the smaller graduations, but I did do, my emphasis was in queer theory and film studies and performance. Nina saying hello. Yes, so many of the same crew from Dion's Live. I love it. But yeah, so I was really focused on queer theory and performance and gender studies and all these kinds of things. My thesis was about male to female gender transgression in film. And so each chapter took on a different sort of subgenre of film. And so, hello, Gerber, nice to see you. Oh, Justin, answer my question. I don't see a question from you. Did you ask a question? I don't see you. Blue Cheetah, what is this? This is Queer Theory 101. Justin, I don't see a question from you, so I can't answer it. But yeah, so it was all about cross-gender portrayals in film. And so we had one chapter that was looking at specifically like drag queen films. So looking at Tu Wong Fu versus Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is going to be one of our topics. I believe that's the last one. I believe that's the one that's on the 24th of June. I think is when that one happens, because I think that it is, it's a historical one, the first Wednesday, then horror films, then the hot spicy topic, and then the like Tu Wong Fu versus Priscilla and other non-horror horror films. Can I get rid? Oh, I haven't switched to all. That's why I haven't seen it. Okay, sorry, that's why I was like, I don't think it's that bad, except that, oh, Cupids. Oh yeah, Cupid content can go. They were filtered out for me, so I didn't even see them. There we go. Yep, so you can go. Let's see. Oh, they were saying a lot. Answer my question. Gerber donated $100. Well, I hope that's true. Last time somebody said that they sent me, they sent me, oh no, sorry. No, what am I doing? Okay. Don't unhide them. Okay, hide them again. Sorry, clearly I probably do need a monitor, a mod, just because I'm not very good at, I pressed the wrong button. I hid them and then unhid them. Let's see, okay, so let's just keep it, make sure I didn't like, yeah, there we go. Okay. So, so basically I looked at different genres and different sort of, cross-gender portrayals, specifically male to female. And I talk about it in the thesis, which is, I think, still available at the Chester Fritz Library in Grand Forks, North Dakota, at the University of North Dakota. But so basically like building one on another and starting with these drag queen films. And so looking at Tu Wong Fu versus Priscilla and how drag queens are used in films and what it kind of means. And then we went into what was called at the time, the book that I was using. I know that this word is a little bit touchy for some people, and it is kind of outdated language, but in terms of like film theory and things, it's the temporary transvestite film. And transvestite is a very loaded sort of term. Hello, Sermophil. Hello, welcome. What are you inside the bathroom? European. I like that. I love a good dad joke. And so looking at films like Tootsie, so temporary transvestite films are like, hello, Mr. Nephilim. Hello from Texas. This is hello from North Dakota. And so temporary transvestite films are like Tootsie, Some Like It Hot, Joanna Man, those kind, where a man, usually a straight man, finds himself unable to find work in his chosen field because he's been pretty much a misogynistic douchebag. And so then the solution is for him to have to go undercover as a woman. And there's the pretense of like, these like transformations are never in any way passing or believable, but we exist in this world where people believe it. And so it creates this interesting dichotomy where what we see, and we know the truth of the person on the screen, but the people in the film don't. And so what ends up is there's this interesting sort of dynamic of, you know, if a man in drag is going after a woman, then we cheer that, right? As the audience, we cheer that because we know that it's a man and a woman. So it seems to like reaffirm heterosexuality. But in the context of the film, it looks like a woman pursuing a woman and vice versa. So if a man pursues one of the men in drag, then that's like a no-no, right? Because these are two men. Heaven forbid we have two men. But in the world of the film, it looks like a man is pursuing a woman. And so it creates these interesting spaces where what the people in the film know versus what the audience knows creates this tension where we end up cheering what looks like non-heterosexual pairings, and, you know, really kind of showing distaste for what appears to be heterosexual pairings. And so so that was kind of, it's long, and again, it's very nerdy. I promise that most of this is not going to be that nerdy and that kind of stuff. And then we went into horror. And so the temporary transvestite films open up this like interesting space where we contend with the differences that are out there in terms of gender and sexuality and all this stuff. Then horror comes along because all of that has to be shut down, right? Like we have to like, we've gotten too free, we've gotten too woke with it, and so we got to bring in some slashers to come in. But there's some interesting gender dynamics that happen with a lot of slasher movies and a lot of horror movies in general. And then the final chapter was a little bit shorter. It was kind of like a postscript to it, talking about Divine and talking about how the early films of John Waters and Divine actually show a way for us to kind of move beyond these traditional constructions of male versus female, straight versus gay, all these kinds of things, all these binaries, these dichotomies that we set up, and that it really kind of pushes beyond that. So that was my thesis. So that was really big and nerdy, but we're going to talk about some basics. I'm interested in the cross-gender portrayals in horror movies. That's something I've never thought about. Yeah, there's a lot of weird gender stuff in horror. And even now, as I've gone back and started to watch more like early slasher films, I'm surprised by how many female killers there were in the early days before slashers really had their formula kind of set up. There were a lot of female killers. So of course we have Mrs. Voorhees in the first Friday the 13th, but we have like Funeral Home. We have there's a Christmas themed one. I can't remember what it's called. But I'm thinking about doing a video where I talk about this sort of like female killers in early slasher films. And yeah, so look for that maybe coming to the channel. But I wanted to come on and give you some kind of the basic concepts, because I think that as much as I loved being a nerd in college and sitting around with a bunch of academics and talking about all this stuff, again, put it on the ground, make it walk. And I think that theory is for everybody. And so I wanted to give some of the like basic kind of concepts that really kind of form the structure of queer theory in a way that people can kind of grapple with and think about and apply to their own lives. And the three people that I want to talk about are Foucault, Sedgwick, and Butler. Those are kind of three luminaries in queer theory. Again, I'm not super up to date on what's happening in queer theory right now. So there certainly absolutely could be things that have come up since then that are impacting the conversations in queer theory. But if you go into queer theory, these are some of the things that kind of set up the basis. So the first one is Foucault. So Michel Foucault, who wrote a lot and focused a lot on systems of power. And that's going to be really important for queer theory, because when we're talking about like a queer lens or a queer perspective, we're talking about looking at things in a different way. So setting aside the sort of traditional understanding that we have of things and looking at them, it's kind of like looking at them a little bit cockeyed, a little bit sort of like Alice through the looking glass. Things are kind of turned around. Jana, I think we only watch sad movies. There are some sad movies definitely in the queer canon, but there's a lot of good joyful ones too. And so Foucault wrote a lot about power, and he's very famous, especially I was a comp teacher for 4 years when I was a grad student. I taught composition classes, and they love to teach his essay about the panopticon. I never did, because I like other stuff from Foucault a lot better, but they would teach the panopticon. And the panopticon, again, because I didn't teach it, my memory on it is getting a little bit hazy, but basically it was about this prison. And I don't know if it was a real prison or if it was the idea of a prison, but it was this design of like a prison. It was called the Panopticon. And the way it was kind of this round building. And you had all of these cells that were like little pie wedges. And then the guard was in the center. So each floor of this prison would have a guard who then could see into all of the cells. One was Lifelong Companion. That's a good one. Yeah, that's an 80s one, so very sad. And so in the Panopticon, they could kind of see. And he talks about the idea that, it becomes this sort of illusion of like omnipresent surveillance, right? Like everybody's like cells can all be viewed from the center part, but also it's kind of an illusion, because if I'm turned this way, what's happening in the cell behind me, I can't see. And so it is this sort of like constant shifting perspective. And it gives you this idea of, because you don't know when they're watching, people sort of treat it as if they're always watching. And it's like, well, actually, if there's, 20 cells around this thing, they can probably only be viewing one or two very well, maybe three at a time, to really watch and see what people are doing. But it gives you this illusion because you never know when they're watching you and all this kind of stuff. And so, hello, CJ, how's it going? We are just getting into Foucault. We were just talking about the Panopticon, but the thing that really matters, especially for queer theory, is the history of sexuality. Now, he wrote The History of Sexuality, volumes 1, 2, and 3. We're going to have a brief aside where I talk about how I was so bittered out because I am convinced that nobody in academics has ever read volumes 2 or 3, because what I found fascinating. So I did a summer like independent study as I was working on my thesis and all this stuff, where over the summer I read a whole bunch of Foucault and a whole bunch of Judith Butler with my master's advisor, and we kind of talked about it and helped shape the thesis with it and everything. So I decided I was going to read The History of Sexuality, volumes 1, 2, and 3. The reason why I'm convinced that nobody in academics has ever read volumes 2 or 3 is because in volume 1, in the introduction, he sets up this whole idea of what he's going to do with The History of Sexuality, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And so he says that if we're going to look at the history of sexuality and how this developed, we need to look at the attitudes and practices in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, and in the Victorian times. And so he said that we're going to set up this project. It's going to be, volume 1, Greeks, volume 2, Romans, volume 3, Victorians, right? That's the setup. That's what everybody quotes. That's what everybody talks about. That's everybody kind of presents. And the first one does go into a lot of the really foundational stuff, and it goes into the ancient Greeks. Get to volume 2. In the introduction to volume 2, he says, I critically misjudged what I'm doing, and I need to have a 4th volume. And I forget what the 4th volume was going to be, because he died before he could write volume 4. And so he only ever wrote volumes 1, 2, and 3. Hello, Durbin. I'll be with you in just a minute. So he only ever wrote 1, 2, and 3 and then died before that. But in the introduction to volume 2, he was like, I had this completely wrong. We need to change the format. We're going to do, and all this kind of stuff. Nobody ever talks about that. All they talk about is the history of sexuality, volume 1. They talk about the ancient Greek stuff, and they talk about what the project is. And so I was so bitter because I was like, am I the only person that has ever read this? Am I the only person? Because I feel like I'm reading a lot of dense philosophy that's translated from French, and it's making me a little crazy. Let's see what Durbin has to say. I have a question as a straight guy who supports LGBTQ community. What needs to be done to help protect LGBTQ folks? I'm just curious, as I have no clue what still needs to be worked on. Well, right now they're coming for our necks, and especially trans people, especially non-binary people. So what needs to be done is people need to use their privilege. And so I tried to do that. This is something that I tried to do as a white person, is that if I see something happening, as a bystanders have a lot of power. And so if you see somebody harassing someone, bullying someone, going, towards someone, putting your body in between them, telling them, what do you think you're doing? Why do you think that this is appropriate? So many times those kinds of people have just never been challenged. And so being willing to challenge someone. Now, obviously, always be aware of your safety and everything, because people be cray. And so you never know who's got a knife or who's got whatever. But the power of bystanders cannot be underestimated. It's really, really important. I think the class I took was called Sex and Death, the Viewpoints Around It. Yes, Sex and Death is a lot of this in queer theory. Yeah, the current administration is not doing a great job at literally anything. But yes, trans people especially right now really need us showing up for them, because the constant attacks on trans people are just out of control. And so Foucault, in The History of Sexuality and in some of his other works, and he certainly starts talking about it in the Panopticon, but he starts talking about the idea, thanks, I value respect while giving people rights, and that's a great way to do so. Yeah, definitely using the privilege that you have, because again, just challenging people on what they're saying and what they're doing is really, really important. So he starts talking about power, and when he's talking about power, he's saying, don't just look at where power says it is or who says they have power. Look at where power actually functions. And so that's really a core concept of queer theory, is we just were talking about the administration, is just because the tangerine twat gets on Truth Social or gets on some faux news broadcast or whatever and says that I have this power, I can do everything I want, well, then we see that starts to unravel, right? He doesn't actually have some of these powers. And the whole thing with the tariffs, because he was like, I can do this, I have the, and then people were like, well, no, you don't actually. Congress has the right. And then it went through the courts, and they a lot of it got overturned. And now there's this whole mess of trying to fix it, because that was the difference between where people who are in power say that power is, and then there's where power actually functions. And that is a key idea. And a really good example for this, if you like detective novels, if you like old school detective novels, Raymond Chandler, who wrote the Marlowe novels, the Maltese Falcon, he has one called The Big Sleep. And there's a scene in there that really, for me, really connected with how to think about this idea of look at where power functions, not just where people say it is. And basically in The Big Sleep, what it is there's this aging millionaire guy, and he's got a couple of daughters, and one is kind of she's a little bit brash, and she's a little bit proto-feminist and all this kind of stuff, and she ends up having a little bit of a romance with Marlowe, the detective. But he's got this younger daughter, and that's why he calls in the detective Marlowe, is because he's got this younger daughter who's a wild child, and she's running around with the wrong people, and there are some risque photographs that have been taken, and they're going to be used to blackmail the family, and he just wants them to go away. He's like, this girl is out of control, I need you to take care of this mess or whatever. Even before this administration, I had a lady come in for an. I was shocked how she was received by some of the people. Yeah, it's been a problem. I mean, we done been knew that this was a problem. Like, queer people have known, like, this is the latest iteration, and it's certainly setting things back, but it's not the first, and it won't be the last. But yeah, so basically, so when he meets this daughter the first time, they're in this big, like, foyer or whatever, and they're standing at the top of a set of stairs. And I it's just so brilliant the way that it's written. I just absolutely love it. Because she's flighty, and she's like, obviously she's not in a position of power in a traditional sense, because these people have these photographs of her. They're like demanding money of all this kind of stuff. So like people would say, well, her father is the one in power. He's got the money, he's got the control, he hires Marlowe, all this kind of stuff. But there's this moment when she first meets the detective, and they're standing at the top of this like marble staircase, like a large marble staircase. And she like gets introduced to the detective, and she goes, "You're cute." So she says, "You're cute." It's so, oh, I just love this. She says, "You're cute." Then she like throws herself. The way it's written, I'm always trying to picture, like, he's somehow near the edge of the stairs, and she throws herself backwards like she's going to fall down the stairs, and he catches her, and she says, "You're cute. I'm cute too." And that to me is such a personification. It's such a good like metaphor for this idea of look where power functions, because in a traditional sense, her father has all the power because he's the one who's got the money. He's hiring the detective. She's coming in and asserting her power. She's saying, I may not have the traditional power. I may not have the sort of traditional understanding of power, but she threw herself backwards knowing that he would catch her. And so she's saying, I don't get to have the money, I don't get to have the strength, I don't get to have the power, I don't get to have whatever, but I can get people to do the things I need them to do. So who's got the power? If I can get my dad to just pay the money or send the detective, and they're going to get these like naughty photos and it's all going to go away, all I had to do is say, Daddy, take care of this. And he does. So who has the power? So that's what he's talking about, is this idea of you have to like look at where the power actually functions. You have to look at where the power functions, not just where the traditional lines of power are. It's getting harder to get HRT meds where I am now. Unfortunately, that's going to affect a lot of clients. Yes. People are so insane. First of all, who cares if people are having gender affirming care? But people have such a limited understanding of what gender affirming care is and who gets it. And I mean, perimenopausal and menopausal women have hormone replacement therapy. Men who take those testosterone dick pills, that's gender affirming care. If you want to get rid of gender affirming care, all you white saggy dick motherfuckers better get rid of your Viagra and your Cialis and all that kind of shit, because that's gender affirming care. Maybe you were just God meant for you to have a floppy dick. I'm so sorry about it. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I had one of my peers say, you just can't hire her just because he felt she was not a she. Yeah, that's the employment discrimination around trans and non-binary people is just insane. It's just so harmful. And now these things where they're like trying to cancel people's driver's licenses and passports is just making the employment problem even that much harder. It's so awful. So that's Foucault, and that's the idea of looking for power where it functions. So the next author that we need to talk about is Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick. And Eve Sedgwick is known primarily for two different books. I've got the notes down here: Epistemology of the Closet, and then she has one called Between Men, English Literature and Male Homosocial Desire. That word is going to be important. In the Epistemology of the Closet, which is one of the like very basic, if you take a Queer Theory 101, you're going to read Epistemology of the Closet. But basically, she's talking about the emergence of sexuality as an identity, because, you know, homosexuality, I think 1896 was the first time it was ever used as, like, that term even existed, was it? So all this stuff where people, like, try to have translations of the Bible that say homosexuality, it's like, that didn't exist. Like, in the time of the Bible, there was no idea of people having same-sex attraction as an identity. And so that's what she does in Epistemology of the Closet, is to kind of shape and like trace the trajectory of sexuality as an identity, because before it was just behaviors. And so they would talk about specific behaviors that people would do, but it didn't change your identity. It didn't change who you were. There wasn't this idea that people were innately this way versus this way versus this way. And so that's what she does in Epistemology of the Closet. So very important, and that it was just as important of a facet as sex or gender, that was an important part. That's going to be important when we get to Butler. So that's why we kind of go from Foucault to Sedgwick to Butler. It kind of traces in a line. So if you were going to read any of these texts, that would be something that would be kind of the order to go in if you wanted to do that. Or you can find, they have like, what I find really interesting is there are some companies, I don't know if they're all still in print or if there's different types of them, but a lot of times these big, like, dense, like, theoretical stuff, there are different companies that make, like, little graphic novel cartoon books that explain it really, really well. And I know that sounds like it's diminutive, but it's not. Like, it really does just kind of explain things really, really well. It could affect patients with endometriosis, PMDD, and ovarian cysts, and so on as well. Yes, there's so much of it that is just, let's have doctors make doctor decisions. Like, that's what some of it just boils down to. Let's let the medical professionals be in charge of medical things, maybe. Why do you think it's difficult to get the estrogen? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why there's no reason for it. There's no real reason for it. Hello, Dawn. How's it going? I haven't looked into it yet, but I'll start with my endocrinologist, which is a long distance trip. No specialist here. Oh, no. People are saying hello to Dawn. Hello. So Epistemology of the Closet is a really important book where it talks about this. How did sexuality become an identity? How did we come to think of that as an identity? How did that become part of our understanding of the self and the different facets of identity that we have? Then she wrote, which for me, like pop culture studies and media studies, the one that's really important is Between Men, English Literature, and Male Homosocial Desire. And that word is important because she talks a lot about this idea of homosocial desire. I need to email him some blood work results and we'll attach a message to his nursing staff. Yes, I'm glad that you have somebody who is still taking care of that. I know that different places, and the more rural or the more out of the like blue states and everything, that it gets much, much harder. And the idea of homosocial, what she's talking about in that book is she's talking about why does literature feature so many love triangles? Why do we always have love triangles? And it's almost always two men and a woman. So they're like fighting over this. And what she's saying is she's saying that this really isn't about the love triangle. In fact, it's not really about the woman at all. That so many of these love triangles are about this homosocial desire, where these two men are in some way are trying to work out their sort of feelings for each other. Not necessarily sexual, but that men are so forbidden in our Western construct of gender. Men are so cut off from their emotions that they're not allowed to sort of work through or talk about or think about their connections with other men. They can only do that through a woman. If they both focus on a woman, then they can fight and they can argue and they can work through what their homosocial, again, because it's not necessarily homosexual, it's their homosocial, their like feelings about each other. And so this gets into like male friendships and like, what does that mean? And how does it mean to be sort of emotionally vulnerable with men, between men? And so she goes into this whole like understanding of like, what are these triangles all about? And that's why a lot of like newer things, it still happens. If you think about like the Hunger Games, there's that love triangle that follows them through the whole thing. It's Katniss, but it's also Gale and it's also Peeta. And so like they're sort of, and there's scenes where there's like the relationship between them. And so it's something that continues, and it continues to be this idea of, you know, in order for men to work through this, they need to have a woman that's the focal point, and then they can work on it. Colorado is a very purple state. And Janet, thank you for asking, because like I mentioned about a far vaster need than just trans people, other people need to know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gender affirming care is, I mean, it's absolutely life-saving for trans people, but it's also a larger issue. And like, they're not even thinking about all the other people that are going to be hurt when you start to like take away the stuff. And because that's what they do. These Republicans, sorry, we're going to take a little break while I have a little soapbox moment, but these Republicans, they don't think past the end of their own nose and their own bigotry and their own stupid ideas, because they don't understand what anything is. They just understand what Fox News tells them. And so if they say trans people get gender affirming care, they don't understand that like there's a bigger thing. There's bigger things that are included in that. But they can't see, because again, it's kind of like the guy who got deported, who was like the leader of Latinos for Trump. Because he didn't understand that like his bootlicking to the administration was not going to protect him. That, you know, he didn't understand that like, and the people were like, oh, they're just gonna take all the like bad people away. And then now all these farmers are like, I'm losing my farm because I don't have anybody who can work and I can't get any workers. And it's like, well, that's what you wanted. That's what you voted for. Like, you voted for this, but you couldn't see past the end of your own nose, because you just had this story of the rapists and murderers and all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's insane. It's so crazy. I have some theories that do not align with the supposed scarcity. It has to do with control and money. Yes. I think I get what you're saying there, Janet. And I think, yeah. Maybe they don't care who they hurt as long as the scapegoat gets hurt. That's American marksmanship. Spray and pray. Yeah. Yeah. So they either didn't anticipate it, or some of them don't care. Some of them are just like, well, as long as the people I hate get hurt, if other people get hurt too, well, them's the breaks. But then and then when they get hurt, that's the other thing, is like, then they don't like think far, even those far steps ahead to figure out when it's going to hurt them. And it's like, what? You didn't see a world in which this could happen? No, because Fox News never told them to think that. Newsmax didn't tell them to think that. Excuse me, pretty girl. That to me was so stupid, voting to deport. Yeah. Absolutely stupid. People who had immigrant wives. That's the one that gets me, where it's just like, it'll be this man who's married to an immigrant and then didn't like, is all like, what, she got deported, or like women who were married to immigrants and then their husbands got deported, and it's like, what are you talking about? And many medications from overseas and all that. Yeah, absolutely. So about queer theory. So yeah, so that's the Sedgwick Between Men, this idea of the love triangles. And that kind of thing runs through a lot of like literature discussions, literary analysis, film analysis. Something that's very similar is the idea of the monstrous woman, which doesn't have the triangle aspect, but if you think about something like The Exorcist, but it's very related and it's very kind of a queer lens as well, is the idea of the monstrous feminine, the idea that in order for men to think about their emotions, think about, you know, these traditionally feminine things, that a woman near them has to become monstrous. So if you think about The Exorcist, the original book, The Exorcist, the main character, the person who was possessed, was a little boy. And when they turned it into a film, they turned it into a little girl. And they wanted to explore Father Damien and his relationship to the church, his relationship to his mother, who dies during the course of the film, and then Reagan like speaks as his mother, why you do this to me, Demi? And all that kind of stuff. And so in order for him to be vulnerable, all right, Deanna's gonna put us on the TV and fix lunch. I hope you have a yummy lunch. Yeah, and so Father Damien, in order for him to be able to be vulnerable and to think about these more vulnerable things, his relationship to his mother, his relationship to the other priest that's there, his relationship to his faith, in order to do that, he has to be surrounded by this woman who is absolutely monstrous, because that's feminine. all of that stuff, messing around in your emotions, being vulnerable, all of that is feminine. That's of the woman. It's female. And so then we have to have an actual female that's there who becomes this literal monster. So it's like, well, okay, he's dabbling in this feminine territory, but he's not that, right? Like, he's not that. And so, you know, the devil, this demon that is possessing this child, in some ways becomes an afterthought to Father Damien's crisis of faith and his like feelings about his mother and the loss of his mother. It's not really her story anymore at all. It's really about him. And so, yeah, it's wild. So that's the kind of thing that is very, very interesting of the way that, when we think about literature and when we think about film, that's one of the things that is really important in terms of like, what do we expect from men? And if they're going to go outside of that, then how do we give them permission to do that? And we give them permission by, if there's two of them working on their, like, what their friendship dynamic, how they feel about each other, how they care about each other, no homo, then there has to be a woman. There has to be a woman that they can fight over and put all of that, like emotion and everything into. It's focused that way, so it's not in here, because that could be gay, and that's the big threat, right? We don't want to be considered gay. We don't want to be thought of as gay. We don't want to accidentally find out we're gay, you know, any of that kind of stuff. And, you know, with the monstrous feminine, it has to become this kind of monster figure. And then we get to my favorite. Let's talk about Judith Butler. So Judith Butler has three main texts that I love. I'm a big Butler fan. I am a big fan of Butler, Judith Butler. So her three, kind of roughly in order. There's other writings and other books as well, but in terms of the progression of her kind of main trajectory talking about gender, she has a book called Gender Trouble, Bodies That Matter, and then Undoing Gender. And so Undoing Gender came out kind of towards the end of my grad studies, I think. And so I might have used a little bit of that, but I was really focused on Gender Trouble. And with Gender Trouble, she's really talking about the fact that in our society, all gender is a performance. All gender is a performance. She's very much a social constructionist. I am on board with her. All of this stuff that we do, everything that we perform that is about gender, it's not natural. It's not innate. It's very strange, and it's constructed. And often once you get into it, when you get down to it, usually that structure is there because we're trying to control women or control people of color. It's all white supremacy and misogyny. I mean, once you dig down deep enough, that's what all of this like gendered stuff is. And people will say, oh, it's natural, all this stuff. It's not natural. If you are told something, if you're taught something, and if something is modeled for you from like infancy, it's going to feel natural. Now, some people, they don't get it. The programming doesn't work or whatever. That's not what they want. That's not what they desire. And those people, like myself, my childhood, is that you're then always at odds with this stuff. But even the people who like fit in, it doesn't mean that that's natural. It just means that whatever kind of things, as they developed, they got this programming and this modeling, and they decided, yeah, I like that. And maybe that was stuff that they would, if it was a sort of non-constructed, gender-free sort of space, maybe those are the things they would have been drawn to anyway. And so if you think about the things that are sort of considered natural or considered normal by some people when it comes to gender, there's a lot of great examples that really show how it's not natural at all. It's all completely constructed. Let me go ahead and just refresh, just in case there's... I know my chat broke last time, so let me flip it back and forth just in case I have to. Hopefully comments are still coming through. My dad did the laundry when I was growing up. Says the tokens honey never had, so do I. Completely construct. Yeah, and if we think about even like basic, because I was a child of the 80s, and in the 80s things were so gendered. I mean, the way that they went so hard with like pink is for girls, blue is for boys, period. Like that was, there was no question. If you walked into the girls aisle at a toy store, Jesus. I mean, you just got a sunburn from how pink that was. I mean, just like the rays of pink, the Barbie neon hooker pink packaging. I love that color, but it was so like that was for girls, blue is for boys. That only has been around since about World War One. Before World War One, boys there it wasn't as strongly gendered. I mean, the stuff we've grown in now has been so seeped in like this gender politics and stuff. So it was never like as strong as that, but traditionally boys would be dressed in pink and girls would be dressed in blue. And the reason why is, yeah, so it started to reverse around World War One. And before that, it was boys were in pink and girls were in blue. And the reason why is that pink, because pink is like a lightened version of red. And traditionally, people associated red with masculinity, with power, with force. And so then if pink is kind of lighter, because babies, we give them sort of softened versions of adult things, right? Like we give them softer, fluffier kinds of things. And so boys had pink. And then blue was considered to be this kind of wimpy, emotional, like very flowy, and that was what girls were supposed to be. And so girls would be dressed in blue tradition, and a lot of times there was just kind of shared, there was a lot of like white and things where they would just kind of keep it very bland and basic. But if things were color coded, boys were given pink and girls were given blue. Do we know why that changed with World War One? It had to do with, and then it gets stronger in World War II because there was a lot more rationing, and it had to do with production and things like that. Is that once we were in the reality of war, it became much more expensive and much more difficult to manufacture red dye versus blue dye. Blue dye was easier. Blue dye was more affordable. Some of the products that were needed to create red dyes, because of the war and because of international tensions, it was harder, it was more expensive, it was less available to do pink versus blue. Well, we've been telling ourselves that blue is wimpy and weak and emotional. Well, we can't dress boys like that, right? Because that's the thing, is that's the underlying misogyny of so much of this, is that sometimes if we dress girls in something that is meant to be sort of masculine, we kind of let it fly. We kind of let it float under the radar. Excuse me, because we're less concerned with girls as a society, right? Like girls are kind of the afterthought. It's more about what do we do to ensure that boys are masculine and are, meeting their expectations of manhood and all this kind of stuff. So when suddenly we needed to dress boys in blue, then it became very much about, oh, well, blue is this like masculine color. Lord, my screen didn't switch to the live. I've been waiting for you to start and just refreshed, and here I am. Oh no, Tanya, so you'll probably be a little bit behind us. Yeah, so sorry. Hopefully you're caught up, or you'll maybe come back and do the replay. But yeah, and so then it became this idea of, well, if we can only give all the children blue clothes, we have to decide that blue is a boy's color, and we have to come up with this story, this construction for why blue is now a boy's color. That kind of thing is so important, that sort of construction. Like that's one of the most like glaringly obvious. When people say that, like, there are some people who, we have these standards around who can have body hair and where and when and why. And so there's lots of people, if they see a woman with underarm hair, heaven forbid, or, the like, if somebody gets a mustache or they get a little bit of facial hair, people will say things like, oh, that's unnatural. It's unnatural for a woman to have hairy armpits. And it's like, I don't think that word means what you think it means. Do you know what natural means? Do you know what natural means? Because that literally grew out of her body. So that's literally what natural means. Like, nature stepped in and made hair grow. It's not natural. Taking a piece of metal, sharpening it into a blade, and dragging it across your skin to remove hair. Now, obviously, I've never wanted to have facial hair. I shave off my eyebrows, I shave my face, all that kind of stuff. So unnatural isn't bad, but we start to tell this story about is this natural or unnatural? Like women having hairy armpits is unnatural. It's literally the essence of natural. Removing hair is unnatural. We do it for fashion, we do it for cultural expectation, we do it for all of these different reasons, and it has nothing to do with what is actually natural or, something that is in our very essence. It used to be yellow and boys were dressed in gowns or yes, christening gowns. Like little boys used to be in dresses a lot of the time. I love my intuition. I shave my legs because of striving toward an aesthetic, of course, but it's also a fibromyalgia issue. Cat brushed against my calf and my whole skin. Oh no. I'm sorry to hear that. But yeah, the idea of like shaving hair off of parts of your body is all constructed of who gets to have hair, should have hair, when and where and why and all that kind of stuff. It's all just made up. It's all just like made up. And that's why I think it's funny when you hear stories about women who, like, once they get in a relationship, they stop shaving their legs. And it's like, because that's the idea, right? Is you shave legs to like attract a man, like to trap a man. That's the kind of cultural story. We're talking a lot about big cultural stories. It doesn't mean that any of us individuals mean that or believe that or understand that, but these cultural stories that we tell each other and tell ourselves, and often tell ourselves to our own detriment. But yeah, so that's what she's talking about in Gender Trouble, is that all gender is a performance. Like everything is constructed, everything we know about gender, it's not natural. And so then Bodies That Matter. So I almost got ahead of myself. So then she comes out with Bodies That Matter. And she said that the biggest, and I will always remember this because she talks in the introduction about how people would say to her, but what about the body, Judy? And she pointed out the fact that people would like nickname her name because her name is Judith. They would say, what about the body, Judy? And it's like, well, first of all, I'm a woman. And so you think you can talk to me like a child. That's a construction. But she's like, yes, we have physical bodies, and those physical bodies have, primary sex characteristics, our genitals. They have secondary sex characteristics. They have, we have chromosomes. We have all these different things. But she's like, it's not as cut and dried as people like to say. And in fact, we have, and then she sets up the system where she talks about there are bodies that matter and bodies that don't matter. And the sort of system that she kind of elaborates is that our society, so if you think about, we have biological sex, right? Like we have those things that make up the category of sex. We have chromosomes, we have designation of your gender at birth, we have genitals, we have secondary sex characteristics, we have all of these different things that makes up sex. And now we know, like, even with that, it already starts to fall apart there. Because if there's anything, all these people, all these, like, transphobes who want to be like, trust the science, trust the science. Tell me that you have a second grade understanding of science without telling me you have a second grade understanding of science. Because they just, at some point, got to second grade where they're like, there are boys and there are girls. And they just stopped learning. And then they tell other people to trust the science. The absolute audacity. The absolute audacity. Because if you really understand science, you will know that science abhors a binary. Binaries just do not exist in science. Science and nature love spectrums. They love a spectrum. If you think about things that are in like the natural world that are presented as binaries, presented as opposites, think about day and night. It immediately starts to fall apart, right? Because how do we know if it's day or if it's night? Because we have all these words like dawn, daybreak, twilight, sunset, sunrise. And so the line from day to night isn't, we know if it's noon, we know it's day. We know if it's midnight and it's dark out, it's night. We know that. But the process of going from day to night is this beautiful continuous spectrum where it gets a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, 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 lighter. Then something shifts and it goes darker, 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 darker until it's dark. Then lighter, lighter. Like it's a spectrum. It's never, we call it day and night and we think of it as opposites, but it's absolutely not. It's absolutely not. Let's see, just an aside. Pardon for possibly revealing too much. I have minor intersex traits, and so one of those blood. Yeah, and that's it. So that's like the thing is that when we talk about people say trust the science, and it's like, well, what do you mean? Are you talking about chromosomes? Because there's like 100 different like potential chromosomal combinations, and even if you have the different chromosome like combinations, they don't always present themselves in the same way. It also has to do with hormone levels and different sort of hormones and chemicals that people are exposed to during fetal development. And so it's a spectrum. It's this whole range of, and primary sex characteristics. People just think, oh, penis or vagina. It's not that easy. There's intersex. And so there's this kind of spectrum going from, and this is where I'm a little bit behind because, again, I haven't been doing this and I haven't been reading the like research. So like they used to refer to it as hermaphroditism. And I know that has moved to like intersex. When I was doing it, they would talk about like true male and true female as describing genitals. And then it was this like spectrum in between where people would have different combinations of things. They would function in different ways. And so I don't think that my technology, I don't think that my terminology is perfectly up to date, but it was this spectrum from what we traditionally associate with basic male sort of sex characteristics all the way to what we consider female sex characteristics. And it's this spectrum of this wide range of ways that things, and I don't know if this has changed, but I know at some point there was a sociologist or an anthropologist who broke it down into like 5 categories. And so it was sort of like, and again, this is where I feel bad because I feel so out of date. Because when they would talk about like male and then like intersex was in the middle and then female, and then the ones on the side were like, it was like partial intersex male dominant, partial intersex female dominant. Again, I don't think I have I keep saying technology. Why do I keep saying technology? But it was like this spectrum, and you could group into like these different categories. And so when people say, oh, trust the science, it's like, oh, the last time you dated someone, did you get a chromosomal analysis from them? Did you find out what their chromosomes are? Do you know what your chromosomes are? Just because a couple of them are more common doesn't mean that that's the only options. And it doesn't mean that just because you think you have a certain chromosomal arrangement that you do. Let's see, pardon. Okay, interesting. Yes. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you being willing to share these vulnerable things with us. I absolutely appreciate that. And so she talked about this idea of there are bodies that matter, because we start with this like sex category. And then we go into gender. And gender is where we have these constructs of masculine and feminine. And so in terms of like deciding what bodies matter, do you have this sex designation that is male, and is your sort of presentation and your sort of your approach to the world, is it what we consider traditionally masculine? If it is, then your body matters. And if it's not, then your body doesn't matter. Our culture doesn't acknowledge it, doesn't recognize it. And then the third vector of that becomes sexuality. So in our culture, if you are male-bodied, you should have masculine characteristics, and you should be attracted to female-bodied, feminine bodies. If you are female-bodied, you should have feminine characteristics, and you should be attracted to masculine, to male-bodied masculine people. And so it gets a little bit like, it gets very thick and very dense, right? But we understand what she's saying there, of like, if you are a man, you should be masculine and you should be attracted to women. If you're a woman, you should be feminine, you should be attracted to men. And she said that with the development of this understanding of sexuality, and with the emergence of, gay and lesbian people, she said that we started to allow other bodies to matter. So suddenly, if you were like male-bodied and you were masculine and you were attracted to other male-bodied, that was okay. And like female, feminine, female-bodied. Sometimes the gender, if you were masculine but you were attracted to like women, that was okay. Like your body mattered. It mattered less, but you still came to matter because we came to understand that as a legitimate identity. And so she's saying that there's people who fit into all these different vectors in different ways. And sometimes they pretend to fit in a vector a certain way so that they get the cultural capital of their body mattering. And that's why you get so many of these like closeted gay Republicans, because they're trying to make sure that their bodies matter, that they don't lose their social power. But then again, Foucault would say, but where's the power really? If you have to hide yourself, if you have to lie, if you have to attack other people in your own community, do you really have power? You think you're getting power from this, but you don't. So that's the kind of then bodies that matter. And then Undoing Gender is newer. She really goes back to Foucault. And so she starts to talk about like what governs gender and gender presentation with the rise of more understanding of trans people and non-binary people and gender non-conforming people. How does that change how we like govern and like think about and deal with gender and with sexuality and all that kind of stuff. This reminds me of the gender category some Native people had. They were, yeah, like this. Other cultures have done this so much better than we have. Absolutely. In terms of like gender, like in terms of how people experience, and also with sexuality, absolutely much better systems of understanding it. I wish it weren't a thing because it shouldn't matter, yet everything is constructed around. Yeah, so much is around gender because we have to control women. That's what it all comes down to. The whole thing is like, I love playing in theory, but the more you dig into anything that is wrong, anything that is causing problems, it's either about controlling women or it's about controlling black and brown people all the time. It's either racism or misogyny. I wish it were more nuanced than that. And sometimes like the details of it are more nuanced, but at the end of the day, it's either racism, misogyny, or sometimes you get the double whammy and it's both. So that's what I learned in college is I was like, oh, as you start to dig into these things where like things are dysfunctional, that's what you find at even homophobia, so much of it is just repackaged misogyny. Because if you think about like how people made fun of gay men, like when I was a little kid and I was like targeted as the queer kid, well, how did they like, you were a sissy, you know, like, oh, are you a girl? And like, if you didn't have the like masculine play style that they thought you should have, so much of it was tied up in our culture's hatred of women that it just got repackaged of like, oh, you're being like a girl. And that's why there was like, if you were a feminine boy, you were a fag. If you were a masculine girl, you were a tomboy, which sometimes there was some worry about that. And there was some like push to correct that. But there was more leniency for tomboys than there was for sissies. And so because it's all about, you know, if a young girl is trying to take on masculine characteristics, she's trying to grab power in a world where she doesn't necessarily, under the construction, have power, right? That's why people react, I think, so much more strongly to drag queens than to drag kings. Because, I mean, women have been putting on pants for a long time now. Or you hit like a girl, exactly. Boys don't cry, you can't have emotions, all that kind of stuff. It was all rooted in femininity because women were hysterical. Their emotions made them hysterical, and which comes from hyster, which is womb, and that comes from this idea of the wandering uterus. They thought that during menses, women's uteruses would wander about their bodies and make them crazy. I mean, and that was science. That was like scientists who said shit like that. Like, trust the science. Like, not that science. Jesus Christ, don't do that. Yeah, so it's really, I also love Judith Butler she had a really interesting book. It's a really kind of short book, and it's not one of her better known ones, but it's called Antigone's Claim. And what she kind of posits in this book that I think is really, really interesting is she kind of puts forward this question of, the vapors, yes, getting the vapors. She puts forward this question of how would our society be different if instead of basing psychoanalysis, if Freud hadn't taken, when he developed psychoanalysis, if he hadn't taken Oedipus as being our cultural story, the whole like boys are going to want to sleep with the mother and kill the father and all this kind of stuff. He took that and ran with it, and it became this cultural story. And Freud is a fucking freak anyway. Like, Freudianism is so fucking dysfunctional. But she says, how different would it be if instead of taking the story of Oedipus, we had taken the story of Antigone? And the story of Antigone, I don't know it very well. Again, it's been quite a few years since I read that book. But the story of Antigone is sort of this like post-Oedipal thing. So it's after the whole Oedipus thing. But Antigone, it was during a war where for the ancient Greeks, it was very important for respect for their beliefs about the afterlife, for people to be buried. It was sacrilegious for people to be left above ground. And so there was this war where Antigone's people were attacked by this other king, and the king decided to punish these people, that they would leave the bodies on the battlefield. They weren't going to get burials. And anybody who tried to bury these bodies would be like threatened with death. They would be threatened with execution. And Antigone stood up to this ruler and decided to bury the dead. And so she was going out and burying the dead. And so it became, and it's this story that Judith Butler uses to talk about the idea of kinship. Like, what does kinship mean? Is it just about the nuclear family? Is it just about this Oedipal thing? Or it's a way of talking about like how queer people have chosen families. That you have your birth family, your blood family, but you also have your chosen family. You have kinship, and you create community. And so Antigone resisted. Now, it's a much more ambiguous story because Antigone is killed at the end because she did this, because she defied this emperor. So again, she's trying to have power. She's defying the official power. She does get punished for that. So it's a complex story, but Butler really kind of puts that question forward of like, how different would our society be if we decided to define ourselves by Antigone rather than Oedipus? And I just thought it's such a fascinating idea. I need to reread that. I think I still have that book in my library. I need to, I don't have all of my books from all of my like theory books and stuff from college, but I need to drag some of those out because I would like to reread Antigone's claim. Way back in the day, women were sent to the doctor by the doctor to get masturbated. Yes, the first vibrator. Sarah Rule, who's a playwright that I love, wrote In the Next Room, the vibrator play. And it was like, that's how the first vibrator was developed, was if women were hysterical or if they had mood disorders, they thought, well, just masturbate them, and so that men wouldn't have to, like, so that the doctor wouldn't have to just like manually do it, they developed vibrators. History is fascinating. There's so much in history that is so weird. As a trans woman coming out, you're not a real man. You're not a real man. Guys, I think I'm supposed to be a woman. No, you're a man. Yeah, that's so interesting what you're saying. What I think, if I say it wrong, you can feel free to correct me. But this idea of, there's all this stuff where, like, if there's any perceived femininity or any perceived weakness or vulnerability, they'll call you a sissy. They'll call you a woman. You're not really a man. You're not really a man. But then if you transition and you tell them, this is who I am, well, you're not that, you're a man. And it's like, well, make up your mind. Make up your mind. They just want you to be wrong no matter what you are. But just this idea of, and that's like, as a drag queen, I've heard all that kind of stuff of like, there's always the people who come in the Thursday who end up in the chat who will be like, you're a man. And it's like, what? What do you think is happening here? What do you think is going on? It's so strange. Freud is nasty. I prefer Jung if I had to choose from the two. Yeah, Freud is fucking weird. He's a fucking weirdo. And the fact that he's had as much, I think that like just the impact that he had on like the 40s through the 70s should be considered domestic terrorism. Like, he's international terrorism. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, Freud did so much harm. Ugh. Honestly, years ago, I really screwed up. I had a trans person trying to figure herself out, and I didn't understand at the time, and put her in a box figuratively. Oh, Janet, don't be too hard on yourself. It's good to like recognize when we've done harm and to try to take accountability and all that. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think that I always, like Maya Angelou always said, when you know better, you do better. And so I think there's a lot that I've certainly made mistakes, and I try to. For me, it's always in all of this kind of stuff, it's never about sitting in a place of guilt. Um, except to kind of acknowledge the harm that was done, to learn from the harm that was done, and to like make changes to do better. I always, because there's some people who think that like when we talk about some of these issues, that people just want like white people to just sit and stew in their white guilt, and it's like, no, that doesn't do anybody any good. I don't want to hear about your white guilt. I'm not interested in it because it doesn't accomplish anything. And so I think that it's all about what do we do with that to kind of move it forward. The ancient Greek word for PTSD is hysteron. I'm not going to try to say that. Traumatikos. You're acting like you have a womb. Oh my God, I did not know that. Oh, wow. Okay. It's a regret. She was coming out and I was not fluid enough, but I learned from it big time. I'm glad to hear that you learned from it. Yeah, that's the thing, is that I think that, I've had some great conversations with people, not very many from high school. I've had one person from high school reach out to me, and that relationship kind of imploded for completely other reasons, but who really apologized and was like, we did not treat you very well in school. And I don't know if anybody else has ever apologized to you, but I want to apologize to you. And I'm like, actually, you're the first. Most of these people have never apologized or even acknowledged anything. But I also recognize that like where she was coming from, that wasn't who she was anymore. And the fact that she even reached out told me that and she was never one of the worst ones. That's the other thing, is that like she was already not one of the really bad ones. And so for her to then be like, I'm so sorry about this, to me it was like, this is not about you sitting and stewing in it. Like, do what you need to do to process through that regret and to feel that and to acknowledge it and take accountability for it. But it's all about the growth, because if we just sit in our yuck, we don't get anywhere and we don't accomplish anything. I agree with Janessa. I can't believe that you're anything but good-hearted. And even a few years ago, information was so much. Yeah, I think people change. I mean, that's because I did the thing. So when Dramageddon, so this is we've talked about most of the stuff. We've talked about the queer theory stuff. So now we're kind of just more in a conversation. But because a few years ago, I believe we do the best we can with what we have and understand at the time. I've made so many mistakes over the years, but we've managed to get past it, and I've learned a lot. I hope. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's Mama Champagne and I had some dark years. We had some dark years. And it's about not being stuck. It's not about, I think about tarot cards because the Hanged Man is this tarot card that represents stagnation. And so to me, like if people just want to sit in their guilt and their shame, I understand that it's difficult and it's embarrassing and all that kind of stuff, but it also like, it keeps you from having to move forward and learn new things and do new things. And so just don't be stuck in it. This is a conversation I've had with a friend because we're kind of each other's like armchair therapists. And so like when she's feeling really like yuck about something, I'm like, feel the yuck. It's fine. I was like, you can visit there, just don't unpack and move in. And so that to me is what it's all about. There was something else that I was going to talk about and I can't remember. So I was talking about Dramageddon. So in Dramageddon, the whole thing with Jeffree Star and Gabriel Zamora and Laura Lee and like all the old tweets or whatever, I've never been somebody who used like really edgy language or whatever, but I was like, I can't say that I've never done it. So I was like, I'm going to go clean up my Twitter. I was like, we need to check the Twitter. I was like, I don't know if I'll ever go anywhere where anybody would even like look into my Twitter or whatever. Cause I was like, I don't think I've ever, because I was like, I've never been the kind of person. I figured out pretty quickly that like the N-word was not for me. Because I know that was a thing. Like sometimes people feel like, oh, you're being edgy, you're being an edgelord, whatever. Like people say it to like get a reaction or whatever. I was never that person, because as somebody who was called a faggot for their entire childhood, I figured out the like concept of in-group language pretty quickly. And I was like, that word is not for me. And I do sometimes understand why certain people get it wrong, because I think since they hear it so much in certain types of music, I think that they misunderstand the in-group language. And I think they think that, oh, that's an in-group language of people who like this kind of music. And so because I like that kind of music, this is in-group language for me. And that's why I think some of the people who get in trouble for using the N-word, I think it is important to make the distinction between like the hard R and the not and the soft R, because I think some people, they really do think that it's part of their culture because they like hip hop and they're part of that sort of culture. And it's like, no. I understand why you'd make that leap, but not correct, not correct. And so I figured out pretty early, I was like, that word is not for me. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to find that on there, but I absolutely did. Not very many, because again, I've never been that kind of like edgy communicator, never trying to make that kind of a joke. Like, I wasn't trying to punch down, but I did sometimes. I had a few instances of the T slur on there, and a lot of it. This is so dumb. This is so. Where it came from is because there was a time in like the early 2000s where everybody was saying hot T slur mess. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? And especially who I remember in culture doing that was Christian Siriano, who was on like Project Runway season 3, 4. I don't remember which one he was on, and that was just in my vernacular of saying like, oh, what a hot tea mess or whatever. And at that time, like I didn't have the sort of like mental structure, my construction of how people existed in the world. I wasn't able to make the connection to the fact that I was not saying it even about people. I was mostly saying it about like situations. Oh, that situation is a hot tea mess. And so to me, I didn't connect it of like, but that's still a word that is used against people. And when it's used against people, it makes people feel the way that you felt or similar to how you felt when someone called you a fag. And so it took me a while to like put that together. So I did clean up my Twitter and I got rid of any of those because I was like, I now understand. I was like, oh yeah, that's not okay. Sorry, I need to go back. Then I had decided to transition to date men, started dating a woman, had difficult understanding why she was in contact with me. I could have handled it better. Yeah, I mean, we all have things we could handle better, but can I quote that? Don't unpack and move in to a housemate. Yes, absolutely. I think it's such, I'm sure I didn't come up with it on my own. I'm sure somebody said something like that to me of like, don't unpack and live there. Outgrow that, because I have this friend who just like ruminates on things and just gets so caught up in the like, if she does something that she feels like she messed up or something, she just lives in that like shame of it. And it's like, feel that, whatever. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I'm just saying, don't unpack and move in. Like, it's just move through it, process it, get what you need to get out of it. Time I watch nothing. I feel naive and ridiculous. The T slur. So I'll say it one time, tranny. People would say hot tranny mess. There, I said it twice. I'm sorry. But like, it didn't connect to me. I was like, how could I not see that? Because now I look back and I'm like, what? Like, how could you not make that connection? Another reason why I will say, which I think is very strange, is that I, for a few years, 2-3 years, worked at an adult bookstore. And so like the T slur was also like the industry term for a type of pornography. And before that, and I should have been able to put it together, because they started calling it T slur porn after they used to call it she-male porn, which is even worse. But that was like an industry term. Like when they would give out like porn awards, like that would be the award, would be like best she-male scene or whatever, best she-male performer. And it's like, oh, and then they upgraded it to like T-slur porn, and then it became transgender, and I think there's other like subgenres and things, but like, yeah. So and Christian Siriano would all be like, "Oh, it's such a hot tea mess," and I just like that. It became part of my like lexicon, and I didn't even think of it. And so I did have some like shame and regret about that, but I was like, but you have to like move through it. You have to process it and like do better. If you know better, you do better. And the more you stay like stuck in it, you don't grow and you don't move past that and move into a place where you can. And there has to be accountability, and there has to be like actual growth and actual learning. I think sometimes now we're seeing it where all the like upset maggots are trying to leave the cult and think that they should just be immediately forgiven and not have to do anything to repair the damage that they've done. And it's like, no. You set the house on fire. And yes, at some point, well, maybe I'll talk about how we can live together, but the fucking house is on fire. And you helped start the fire. So you need to help us put it out before we're going to talk about how you just get to come back. And like, so it's not about the sitting in it and stewing. It's about, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Hello, Ultra Mega Patriot for Life. Oh, Lord, that's a choice. That's a choice. TDS channel. Trump derangement syndrome. He's the one who has Trump derangement syndrome because he's drowning in dementia. Let's get rid of you. There we go. We got away from the Thursday for quite a while. We got away. I've heard the T word from fetish chaser guys trying to get with me too. Never block somebody. Yeah. And that's the thing and it's now where you tend to hear it is in that like kind of chasery, fetishy, kind of gross way. I'm glad we don't hear it around as much. And then we had a speaker come to campus who, because I was feeling bad about it, I was like, I had started to think about it, and she said, "Oh, that's a hot brick mess." And I was like, I like that better. I like that better. So then it became hot brick mess, and then it was, that became my new statement for catastrophe. And so it solved that pretty easily, is that this is a hot brick mess. I think you're correct, or at least that would make sense. But I was too stupid to realize at the time. I'm thinking it was 2010-ish. I can't remember. Didn't understand. At the time, I'm thinking it was 2010-ish. Oh, are you talking about that situation where you had the friend who transitioned? Was like 2010-ish? How is 2010 like 16 years ago? When I was putting this together, and I was like, because it's been 30 years since I graduated high school. 30 years. I graduated in 1996. I've like come to terms, it's weird. Time is weird, and how we think about time is weird. Because I've somehow come to terms with the fact that this is like the 30th anniversary. But when I was starting to put this together, and I was thinking about, okay, here's my qualifications, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh yeah, I have an MA in English from 2008. I was like, wait a minute. That's almost 20 years ago. I was like, that's not graduating from high school. That's like, I've gone through an undergrad and a graduate, and that's 20 years ago, just about. It hurts my heart. It hurts my heart a lot. I don't like it. No, that was yesterday, and I've been 35 for the last 30 years. Exactly. All this time has passed, and these numbers keep coming up, and somehow I'm still a fresh-faced girl of 22. How does this happen? How does this happen? I don't understand. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild to me. So, but that's our first Pride chat. Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you everybody for sharing. I really do appreciate it. I love the conversations that we have here. I know sometimes we have some Thursday who show up, some like trolls who are not the good trolls, they're the bad trolls, and they cause a little bit of problems. But I appreciate that everybody comes in and is sharing in the chat and is giving us pieces of themselves and sharing that with us as part of these chats. So I really do. So I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it, because I'm such a nerd for queer theory. I love queer theory, and I think it's so interesting, and it's a way to think about the world in different ways, because I really think right now, especially right now, when we think about this administration and how they are making everything so shitty for so many people. But it's a reminder of how important community engagement and community action is, because don't just look at who tells you that they're big and powerful. Look at where the power is actually happening. Where are people? The ICE protests in Minneapolis. Like, that was power functioning in very specific ways to push back on these official channels of power. And so I think that queer theory is very useful. I think it gives us a very interesting way to look at culture, to look at movies, to look at TV shows, all these kinds of things. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you got something out of it. I hope you'll come to other Pride Chats every Wednesday in June. On June 3rd, this Wednesday, so 2 days from now. 2 days from now, we're going to talk about trans and gender nonconforming people in queer history and how important they were. We're also going to talk about some pre-Stonewall stuff and like how we got to where we are, how the very first Pride was a riot. We're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. Then on the 10th, we are going to talk about queer stuff in horror and slashers and that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about some classics of queer horror, all that kind of stuff. Then on the 17th, we're going to get spicy, and we're going to talk about why the people who say no kink at Pride are assholes and have terrible ideas. And we're going to talk about why the term family friendly is an anti-queer dog whistle. Don't say family friendly. I know it seems like an innocuous term. I know it seems like, why would that ever be bad? I promise you, come to the 17th, bring all of your questions, because we're going to talk about why saying family friendly is an anti-queer dog whistle. And then on the 24th, we are going to talk about Priscilla versus Tu Wong Fu, and we're going to talk about other non-horror queer cinema milestones, things like that. Yeah, the trolls were pretty minor. It didn't get too bad. Thank you, CJ. I appreciate that. I hope that one helpful, curious. Yeah, I hope he does too. I hope he comes back to chat with us a little bit. This was very interesting, and I appreciate your help understanding things that I'm not aware of. Well, you're very welcome. I should get some value out of that really expensive master's degree. Oh, the world. At Punk on Metal Show, they say all ages. That's... spoiler alert, we're going to talk about how that's the term that people should be using, is all ages, or teen plus, or adults only, or 21 plus, or whatever. That's what people should be using. Family friendly is a bullshit term, so we're going to talk about it. Yeah, so I hope everybody is doing well. Speaking of TV, though, can I just say, as a little aside at the very end, we've done all the like queer theory stuff. I'm watching my way through Hacks, and I'm a little bit obsessed with it. So when it first came out, I did watch season 1 of Hacks. This is the problem with current television. I can't take it when these shows have like only 8 to 10 episodes, and then there's like a year and a half in between seasons. Like, what the fuck even is that? So I watched the first season of Hacks, and it ended on this kind of weird cliffhanger. And I couldn't take it, because I was like, now I have to wait. And then when it came out, I was like, well, what if they do that again? So now that Hacks is all the way over, I'm going back and rewatching it. Now I'm into the... So I rewatched the first season, and then now I'm in the second season. I love it. If I really wanted to put on my queer theory hat, there's some really interesting things that are happening in that as well. So if you have not watched Hacks, it's on HBO. It's got Jean Smart and Hannah Einbinder. Love them both. It's had some really fantastic guest stars and cameos, and I also wanted to start watching it again because I know that eventually Deidre Hall is in it, and have a little bit of an obsession with Deidre Hall, and she plays like a heightened version of herself. And I know she shows up sometime, I think, in season 3, and I think she's back in season 5, the last season. So I'm trying to watch my way through Hacks. So, but yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for coming to the Pride Chat. Definitely check them out every Wednesday. Hello, Tanya Meyer from Bismarck. Hello. Hello. I think that's you. Yeah, so thanks for popping it. We're right at the end. We're saying goodbye. But so definitely check out the Pride Chats the rest of the Wednesdays, all of the Wednesdays in this month. And yeah, let's see if I can remember my outro. Don't forget, if you were here in chat, to circle back around and leave a comment below once I make it public, if YouTube lets me make it public. Give me that comment to help me feed the beast, help me feed the algorithm. Replay crew, we already know you rock, so leave your thoughts down below as well, because we appreciate you. While you are down there, don't forget that you can give me that thumbs up to tell me that you appreciated it. If you like this kind of content, if you like these kind of chats, these kind of more nerdy, theoretical kinds of things, give me a thumbs up. Or if you are just like, girl, get back to the makeup, what are you talking about all this shit? Go ahead and give me that thumbs down. It is all engagement. The algorithm isn't a picky bitch, and neither am I. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads. I try really hard to make sure I have at least one video or live per week, and sometimes, if you're lucky, if you're very lucky, you might even get a bonus video. Ooh, Judith Butler-tastic. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, just pretend it's there, The World of Champagne at janessaj.com. Thank you so much for coming for our inaugural Pride Chat. If I think of any other topics, or if people suggest them, I've got a post up on my post tab where you can tell me about other things that you might be interested in talking about. We might have some impromptu that show up here and there, but for sure, every Wednesday in June, we will have a Pride Chat at 7 p.m. Central Time. This one was a little bit later because it was an impromptu one, so those will show up whenever they show up. But anything that is pre-scheduled on a Wednesday is 7 p.m. Central. So I hope everybody has a lovely night, and until I see you again, bye. Oh, well, I've got a Facebook message, and it's covering the thing. Okay.